Hey everybody, I'm Alex Underwood. I'm a senior here at the University of Mount Union, and today I will be discussing the topic of genetically engineering embryos. Now, what I will be discussing is the history of the subject, the three pros, the three cons, the future of the subject, as well as my opinion. Genetic engineering actually began in ancient times as people in East Asia would use the practice of selective breeding and artificial selection of dogs. So according to Gabriel Rangel, wild wolves in East Asia were domesticated, and they were breeded so that the hunters in East Asia could use the wolves more often, because the wolves would often help them when they were hunting. And in 7800 BC, plants and crops began to be genetically engineered, such as wheat and corn. And eventually, in 1973, an organism was engineered by scientists for the first time. And in 1994, genetically modified food intake spread globally. And nowadays, there's GMOs all around the world, and it's helping the food industry out very much. So I'll be talking about some of the pros of genetic engineering. And the first pro is that genetic diseases can be reduced. So according to Julian Savlesko, cystic fibrosis and thalassemia can be prevented through gene editing. And no parent really wants to see their child suffer from a deadly disease. And that's why I believe that parents would be interested in possibly having their children or having their embryos be gene edited. And additionally, further diseases that can only affect one gene could be prevented through gene editing. And what cystic fibrosis is, it's a lung infection at birth where your lungs have limited capacity, and that was found on the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation website. And according to MayoClinic.org, thalassemia is children who are born with lower blood cells. So throughout their early childhood and lives, they experience blood disorders very often. And however, diseases involving multiple genes are more difficult to prevent, because while gene editing a single gene is a fairly simple process, when you're dealing with multiple genes to alter, it's often more difficult and it causes a lot more processes. And Julian also talked about how Alzheimer's and heart disease can be reduced as well through gene editing, which I thought was kind of interesting, because they can't be completely prevented, but it could be delayed. So while some people start experiencing Alzheimer's at the age of 60, they could not experience it maybe till 90 to 100 years old, which would be a pro. And the second pro is increased life expectancy. So on statisticbrain.com, it showed that 68% of people actually fear death. And I mean, I don't know about any of you guys, but that seems pretty scary to me. And also, it's a very interesting option through gene editing, through genetically engineering embryos. If you can live longer, a lot of people are going to choose that option. And scientists have also conducted life longevity tests on mice after editing their genes. And what they found is that the mice risk of common health concerns were significantly reduced, and it would result in a longer life average. And that was found on an article on Vitania.org. The third pro is the avoidance of the genetic lottery. Now, what the genetic lottery refers to is being granted with every desired physical and mental feature. So as you saw early in the presentation, I had a picture of LeBron James. I'm sure many people would want their kids to be built like LeBron James, 6'8", 250 pounds. He's essentially the perfect specimen for a basketball athlete, and because of that, he's making hundreds of millions of dollars. So parents want their kids to be successful, and if they think that the best way for them to be successful is through physical features, then they will often do anything possible to make that happen. And also many people try to spend hours and hours just attempting to improve themselves because many people are not happy with their current features that they have. And I found that American women actually spend an average of $250,000 on appearance in their lifetime, and that is a whopping amount. I'm sure men spend a good amount of money as well, but the article just talked about how much women spend in a lifetime, and that was found on NewYorkPost.com. And additionally, 10% of children are prescribed to Ritalin. And what Ritalin is, it's a prescription drug that's used to improve behavior, focus, and they use it a lot of times because parents want their kids to perform well in the classroom. So now we're going to be talking about some of the cons of genetic engineering. And the first con is overpopulation. I would say this is the most important con there is. The world is already overpopulated. It's already at 7.6 billion. And it has grown by 30 million just this year, and that was found on worldometers.info.com. And the Earth is just not fit to provide to the current population because humans have already affected climate change. They've caused the extinction of numerous animals, and humans have also polluted and deforested the Earth at an alarming rate. And if the population just continues to rise, then the Earth is going to be harmed even more, and it's going to cause human extinction. Especially since there's no other planet that humans can currently go to. I mean, Mars is not completely habitable. We can't just go to the moon. So that's a big issue, and if the world just continues to grow 100 years from now, who knows what it's going to be like. And that was all found on an article written by David Anderson. And the second con is the lack of diversity that could happen through genetically engineered embryos. And that is because infants would be born and grow up with similar traits, strengths, and appearances, and individuality would not be encouraged. And I feel like only the wealthy would really be able to afford genetically engineering embryos, which in turn only a certain amount would have these advantages over others. And I feel like it would cause a divide between the nations and between the people who are genetically engineered and people who are not genetically engineered, which would in turn would cause a cultural divide. And Sean Mermson was the one who pointed that out in terms of the cultural divide. And Christian Wolff noted about the wealthy only being able to afford gene editing. The third con is just simply, is this practice ethical? Because what's going on here is that the baby has no choice on what is being done to him or her physically or mentally, and that could be an issue because let's say a baby grows up with these features. Once it's 10 years old, it's severely unhappy with these features, and that could just cause many big issues. And while the parent could be trying to help them, there's too many things that could go wrong. And you've seen all the protests with whether it's abortions or gun laws. Just imagine the protests that could occur if embryos are edited. And Chris Remington was the one who expressed concern with especially the religious and media protests, which he expressed on this article. Now, talking about the future of gene editing, there has been progress made in China, India, and the United States and in those three countries, just research alone on the subject is allowed. And according to Owen Schaefer, China and India are currently using the CRISPR to alter DNA, and what the CRISPR is clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. And in terms, what they're essentially doing is creating new genes and inserting them in different species such as mice, especially in hamsters and species like that, testing on, however, they have not tested on a human yet, which is likely a very good thing. And additionally, China and the United States have successfully created genetically modified embryos, which is similar to the genes. However, they have not currently inserted them into a womb, and they're currently just in the testing stages, kind of all of that research. And what a lot of these tools that they're focusing on, they improve intelligence, athleticism, and moral reasoning, according to Steve Connor. And he also point out that once they created these embryos, that they were killed off after a few days. So the embryos haven't been alive for more than 3 to 4 days. However, on the bright side, genetically engineering embryos is banned in 29 countries, such as Australia, Austria as well, and Canada. However, countries such as China, India, Russia, and the United States currently have no laws, as I already expressed, and there's no really repeals or acts that are planning to make any laws on the subject anytime soon. Now, in my opinion, I am not in favor whatsoever of genetically modifying embryos. The main reason is because of the overpopulation. Because the Earth is already at 7.6 billion people, we can't afford to have even more people on Earth, and that could make a lot more people live longer. And as much as if I have a kid, of course I want to live long, but I gotta look out for the Earth a little bit. I gotta do my part, I guess, for the Earth. And additionally, there are even water wars going on, because according to Laura Parks, in Syria, the civil war was caused because of water and the lack of it. And that's another issue of overpopulation, is that more countries are lacking the necessary amount of water. And as you see this picture right here, kids have to walk 2 miles every day just to get a big jug of water that their whole family of 8 uses for the entire day. And that just seems like a big issue to me, and it's a big issue around the world, especially in areas such as Beijing, Mexico City, California, Central Valley. And also, according to Healthline.com, there's other ways that you can change your appearance without, gene editing, such as you can change your eye color with surgery. So let's say you want blue eyes and blonde hair, dye your hair blonde, and you can change your eye color with either contacts, or you can do the eye surgery, and voila, your eyes are blue. And to conclude, as I said, I'm not in favor. I have presented the pros and cons, and while there are many pros to genetically engineering embryos, it's not a good idea in the long run. However, I do believe that countries will continue to test on subjects, and I unfortunately do believe that it will eventually occur in one country. I'm not sure if it'll be the United States. It may be China, Russia, India. However, I do think it will eventually occur, but hopefully there are severe, strong regulations on the subjects. And I would like to now open it any questions. Thank you all for listening, and here are my references.